Okay, whenever you're ready.
Hey, I'm Josh with USU Extension, and I'm joined today by our Market Lamb Director for the Box Elder County Fair, Marlon Bingham. We're grateful to be able to be with Marlon today and learn about lamb selection and the things that you're going to be looking for as you go and pick out your next lamb for the fair.
Okay, the first, probably the most important three things that you want to look at when you're going to pick a lamb out, if you have the opportunity to pick it. Now, if you don't have an opportunity to pick, you're going to have to deal with what you have to deal with. But if you have an opportunity to pick, you want one that's smooth-bodied, wide-topped, and square-hipped. Okay, those three things are about as important as they can be. Now, you want them structurally correct on their legs. Now, it's pretty hard to get a good square hip without them being structurally correct. If you get one that's maybe looks to be fairly square, but when you look at him from behind, he's sickle-hocked, then you don't want, that's not a preferred characteristic. So let's try to go with those three things up front. From the sides, you want him to look not excessively long, maybe, but you want him to look adequately long-bodied, deep-bodied. Okay, any more? Now, when I'm talking about deep-bodied, is from here to here. We don't want one that looks like a wiener or a banana or anything that's too tight strung, because they've kind of tied that together with the depth of the loin. If they don't have a deep body, there's no capacity for that other muscle. So that's an important factor. If you're looking at one from the side, try to get one. You see two or three out there. Get one with a deeper body. And this is a good example. This lamb is really a nice selection lamb to take a look at. If we can get you to turn him around and let him look from behind. Look how square this lamb stands. Now, in today's world, everybody wants some of this shag. That's okay too, that's great. That may or may not necessarily make any difference until you get down to two lambs that have all the good characteristics, and one has that and one doesn't. Then you're probably going to like the one with the shag more. But this lamb's really square hipped. He comes back to his tail head really square. He doesn't dump off. So this really is a good selection for a lamb that you'd be looking at there. He's got adequate bone. He stands square on his feet, and he's up on his toes. He's not standing back down on his pastures at all. Now up front, if you can turn it and look at the lamb up front, you want the lamb to be fairly smooth. Obviously, he's got to be thick, and so to be thick, sometimes they're going to have a little bit of shoulder, but you want that lamb to be as smooth-shouldered as possible. That's the trick with these lambs, is to get one with all these other adequate things that you want. Sometimes you end up with a little more of a square shoulder. Now, a good showman, a lot of times you take as much weight as you can off that front end, and that makes those shoulders look to be a little less square. I don't know if you can pick up on that. Okay, but those things are a factor that makes a difference too. But look how straight he is down through his leg. Like I say, he's got good bone. He's up on his pasterns. Those are the kind of things you want to look at. More about the lamb and what you want to look at. These lambs actually, if these were all the lambs that you had to look at, would be four pretty good prospects. Now, if you start to look down here on the far end to the right, the dark lamb, that lamb is probably going to be a bigger lamb. He's going to have a little more leg under him. Now, what they're going to pick for champions these days, they're going to pick on those longer-legged ones. They just are. But if you've had, depending on your feed program, and I'm not one to pick on anybody's feed program, but if you've had a little trouble getting a lamb to make weight, or you barely made weight a few times, don't hesitate to take a bigger framed lamb like that you know is going to be able to put on the weight. The other consideration that you may want to consider, if you know, is the size of the mother, okay, and the size of the dad. If the mother is a little small sheep, and even though that lamb is a pretty good size right now, and then compare that to the actual age of the lamb, and then you're going to be able to determine a little bit about the growth potential that it has. So if you've got one that's got a lot of growth potential, or one that you think doesn't have a lot of growth potential, then you need to know that before you start to feed them. and make that decision for what size lamb that you want to pick, and a little more of the structure of the kind of lamb that you want to pick. Years ago, it used to be we'd take these longer frame, bigger, taller sheep, and we would have them born in April and have them weighing 125 pounds at the fair. That's not that common anymore. I'm not saying you can't have it happen, but it's not that common. So you want to be careful about the size of that lamb and the weight of the lamb up front, and at the time you pick up the lamb too. If you're going to pick up the lamb a lot earlier, then he can afford to be maybe a little bit smaller. But if the lambs haven't been weaned and you pull them off, then you know they're going to get set back just a little bit until they get over that 2 or 3 week period of being weaned. So all those things you want to take into consideration. But then again, as you look at these lambs, and the camera is taking a rear shot, these lambs are all fairly good lambs. If you're going to fault the one clear to the right, you'd say that he's a little apple hind-ended and he wants to taper off just a pinch. He comes back here to the hips and wants to come off a little. Okay, now a good showman can help that a little bit by getting the legs set back a little farther back and push him into him and stretch him out a little bit, and you can hide up a lot of that stuff. But by the same token, a good judge on the tail end is going to get one that just stands out and moves correctly for him anyway. Now, one of the things, if you notice from the side view, what we talked about earlier about him tailing off, you can see that from the side view especially. Okay, but this one here is still coming back real square into the hind end. But if you look at the profile, this is a longer bodied, probably a little bigger frame type of lamb. So he's probably going to end up outweighing these other two lambs by quite a bit if you were going to compare them and start them on feed at the same time. Okay, now one of the other things I wanted to point out with this lamb, and you can mess with one a little bit and kind of see what he wants to do. If you grab one of these lambs like this one, and you just push on it a little bit, and he just wants to square up. And this one has to take a little work to square up. He wants to throw his leg under here. He's not quite, and he's a little sickle hawk. So just keep those things in mind, because when you're showing them, those ones that just square up and stand like they know they're important are a lot easier and funner to show. If you got an opportunity to get one that's like that, that'll make it a lot easier for you to show and a lot funner to show at the same time. But a lamb like this is definitely a usable lamb still, and probably one that's going to be more easily to weigh up for you. With the lambs that's got their wool on like this, if you have a possibility of getting a hold of them and feeling them a little bit, do it, because some of it's a little misleading. You don't know where they somehow will have longer wool at points than they actually do. So go in there and mess with the wool a little bit, push it around and see what it feels like to you, and then take a good feel of them. If I go down the tops of these lambs now, this lamb's probably weighing, I'm guessing 15 pounds heavier than this lamb to the side of him. But if I go over the top of him and I measure that width of the loin, they're virtually the same. Okay, so that means that this smaller lamb is already as thick, and thick really matters. Okay, it's just hard to replace. A good thick lamb is not going to get thinner. Now, a thin lamb may kind of start to get thicker, but a thick lamb's just not going to get thinner in the loin. Now, there's a couple of things after looking at these things I want to just show you a little more. As you're getting over the top of a lamb, you come up here, you want to check it between this hip and the 13th rib, and just see what that width of that loin is, and then kind of get an idea of the depth of it. Now, that lamb's a good full, more of a round-shaped loin. Now, if you come over to this lamb and you feel him, he's more of a flat loin. He's if you get a hold of it, the loin feels like it's got a corner out there instead of round. And it might appear to be the same width, but that lamb will have a hard time showing at this. And if you hung them up, you would definitely be able to see the difference in the different shapes of that loin. And this goes back to more of a round type, but a little bit on that corner. So what you want is those good deep loins. And you can kind of tell, even on a smaller lamb, they're just going to continue with what they've got. So that's an important thing. Now I noticed another thing with this lamb as we were messing around with him. He has a tendency to be so straight in these pasterns. If you can come around over here and catch this, he has a tendency to be so straight in these pasterns that he wants to do that when you're showing him. That'll drive you crazy when you're trying to show one if he does that. And they'll post up and kind of lock that, and that pastern will roll ahead sometimes. Okay. Now he's done that a couple of times as we was moving him, so that's one of those structural things that you might want to take a look at and make sure. There for a while they got these sheep so straight that, boy, they come off there so straight and they were really getting that way, and it's not. Now you see you doing it on the right side a little bit when you set him up. See what I mean? You don't want that to happen. You try that with these, it's not going to happen. But this one, you can get it to do it. Okay? That's not a desirable characteristic. So quite often I'll have kids come to the house and they say they're just looking for one that's got shag. And then they'll have shag and they'll pass up a really good lamb just because one has shag. Don't go so far to do that. If it's a good lamb, take a good lamb because he's a good lamb and he has shag to boot. The other thing I'll have them do is come in and just go through there and they just look out and look at the longest, tallest lamb. That's what they want. That's not necessarily the one that you want. Now we talked about that. If that's something that you feel like you've got to have for your feeding program to make weight, then that's not such a bad deal. But otherwise, that isn't just what you're going to look for. I'll have kids come and say, I want the black one. Well, some of these that look really black right now, when you shear them, that lamb might be blue and he might not stay black. So you know, color isn't necessarily something other than it's just your desire. You still want to start with as highest quality of lamb as you can, and don't let all these other things get in your way. If I was going to place these lambs right now obviously they're not finished product, but if I was going to place them in accordance to what I would think that they were going to pan out down the road, this is the way I'd have them 1 through 4. Okay. Now this lamb here in third, like I say, he's a long frame. He's fairly deep loin, but he's got a deeper loin than what this one on the end does. And then because of that little bit of structure stuff on the legs, I think that lamb will be fine. He'll probably show just fine, but he could get so that every time he posts up, he wants to lock forward. That could be kind of a problem, especially if you're younger and you're not going to be able to reach back there to help quite as much. You want to take those things into consideration. And the same thing with these two. If you're a little smaller and you don't have a lot of reach and you want that lamb to help you show, these two are going to just kind of show for you. You're going to have to work a little more on this one and this one. Those things you want to take into consideration. And then if you take a look at the structure of them, we've kind of already talked about that. But this one is a really smooth top lamb. He's got plenty of depth of body. He's got plenty of depth of loin. He carries back flat. This one carries back as nearly as good, just a little smaller version. Okay, they got good depth of muscle in the hind end, and they're good and square and wide off of those hip points. So those two lambs are some really good prospects in my mind. And these other two lambs are plenty usable prospects. There'll be a lot of lambs that show at the fair that didn't start with as good a product as what these are, I promise you. So you don't want to be too critical, and it just depends on where you're looking for lambs and how much quality there is and how much depth of quality that there is with what you're picking before you get too, go too far over the end with it. So.